that for those of you who are in Long Beach, we'll be able to get together for that study session. Looking forward to it very much, and looking forward to this evening's as well. So again, we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. And I'd like to go ahead and invite everyone to go ahead and unmute, and together we can recite our blessing for this opportunity of studying Torah together. We say our blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity of immersing ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. So again, now if you go ahead and remute, and we will begin by sharing the verses from Torah, book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 1. I'll share the opening verses, and then I'll invite other people to have an opportunity to read, and then I'll present a little bit of a focus study, and then open it up for everyone to share your thoughts and reflections on our Torah portion. So we begin, book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 1. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send one man from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them." So Moses, by Adonai's command, sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, all the men being leaders of the Israelites, and these were their names. From the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, son of Zachor. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Yosef. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hosea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, son of Sodi. From the tribe of Yosef, namely the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gamali. From the tribe of Asher, Sechur, son of Michael. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nachbi, son of Bosi. Verse 15. Richard, would you like to read a little bit?
Sure, thank you. From the tribe of Gad, Geuel, son of Machi. Those were the names of the men whom Moses sent to scout the land. But Moses changed the name of Hosea, son of Nun, to Joshua. When Moses sent them to scout out the land of Canaan, he said to them, "Go up there into the Negev and on into the hill country, and see what kind of country it is. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are the towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich or poor? Is it wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land." Now it happened to be the season of the first ripe grapes.
Thank you, Richard. Anna, would you like to read a little bit at verse 21?
They went up and scouted the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob at Lebo Hamath, and then they went up into the Negev and came to Hebron, where lived Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the Anakites. Now Hebron was founded 7 years before Zoan of Egypt. They reached the Wadi Eshkol, and there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes. It had to be borne on a carrying frame by 2 of them, and some pomegranates and also figs. That place was named the Wadi Eshkol because of the cluster that the Israelites cut down from there.
Thank you, Anna. Let me invite June. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 25?
Sure. And they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Howbeit the people that dwell in the land are fierce, and the cities are fortified and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Amalek dwelleth in the land of the south, and the Hittite, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanite dwelleth by the sea, and along by the side of the Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people toward Moses and said, we should go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they spread an evil report of the land which they had spied out unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have passed to spy it out, it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come out of the Nephilim. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight.
Thank you so much. Dave, would you like to read beginning at the start of chapter 14?
Of course. The whole community broke into loud cries, and the people wept at night. All of the Israelites railed against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in the land of Egypt, the whole community shouted at them, or if only we might die in this wilderness. Why is the Lord taking us into that land to fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be carried off. It would be better for us to go back to Egypt. And they said to one another, let us head back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembled congregation of the Israelites. And Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, of those who had scouted the land, rent their clothes and exhorted the whole community. The land that we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us into that land, a land that flows with milk and honey, and give it to us. Only if you must not rebel against the Lord. Have no fear then of the people of the country, for they are our prey. Their protection has departed from them, but the Lord is with us. Have no fear of them. As the whole community threatened to pelt them with stones, the presence of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the Israelites.
Thank you, Dave. Let me ask Margot, would you like to read beginning at verse 11?
Sure, thank you. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? And how long will they have no faith in me, despite all the signs that I have performed in their midst? I will strike them with pestilence and disown them, and I will make of you a nation far more numerous. Wait a minute, did I skip a line? Wait. I will strike them with pestilence and disown them, and I will make of you a nation for far more numerous than they. But Moses said to the Lord, when the Egyptians from whose midst you brought us up this people in your might hear the news, they will tell to the inhabitants of that land. They will tell it to the inhabitants of that land. Now they have heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of the people, that you, O Lord, appear in plain sight when your cloud rests over them, and when you go before them in the pillar of a cloud by day and in the pillar of a fire by night. If then you slay this people to a man, the nations who have heard your fame will say, it must be because the Lord was powerless to bring that people into the land he had promised them on an oath that he slaughtered.
Very good. Let me invite Jim and Peggy, if you'd like to begin reading at verse 17.
Thank you, Rabbi. Therefore, I pray, let my Lord's forbearance be great, as you have declared, saying, Adonai, slow to anger and abounding in kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of fathers upon children, upon the third and fourth generations. Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people according to your great kindness, as you have forgiven this people ever since Egypt. And Adonai said, I pardon as you have asked. Nevertheless, as I live and as Adonai's presence fills the whole world, none of the men who have seen my presence and the signs that I have performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, and who have tried me these many times and have disobeyed me, shall see the land, and I promised on oath to their fathers, none of those who spurn me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he was imbued with a different spirit and remained loyal to me, him will I bring into the land that he entered, and his offspring shall hold it as a possession. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites occupy the valleys. Start out then tomorrow and march into the wilderness by way of the Sea of Reeds.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jim?
Adonai spoke further to Moses and Aaron. How much longer shall that wicked community keep muttering against me? Very well. I have heeded the incessant muttering of the Israelites against me. Say to them, as I live, says Adonai, I will do to you just as you have urged me. In this very wilderness shall your carcasses drop. Of all of you who were recorded in your various lists from the age of 20 years up, you have muttered against me. Not one shall enter the land in which I swore to settle you, save Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. Your children, who you said would be carried off, these will I allow to enter. They shall know the land that you have rejected, but your carcasses shall drop in the wilderness, while your children roam the wilderness for 40 years, suffering for your faithlessness until the last of your carcasses is down in the wilderness. You shall bear your punishment for 40 years, corresponding to the number of days, 40 days, that you have scattered the land a year for each day. Thus you shall know what it means to thwart me. I, Adonai, have spoken. Thus I will do to all the wicked band that has banded together against me. In this very wilderness, they shall die to the last man.
Thank you so much, Jim and Peggy. And Robin, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 36?
Yes, thank you. As for the emissaries whom Moses sent to scout the land, those who came back and caused the whole community to mutter against him by spreading calumnies about the land, those who spread such calumnies about the land died of plague by the will of Adonai. Of those emissaries who had gone to scout the land, only Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh survived. When Moses repeated these words to all the Israelites, the people were overcome by grief. Early next morning, their fighting force set out toward the crest of the hill country, saying, "We are prepared to go up to the place that Adonai has spoken of, for we were wrong." But Moses said, "Why do you transgress Adonai's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be routed by your enemies, for Adonai is not in your midst. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites will be there to face you, and you will fall by the sword, inasmuch as you have turned from following Adonai, and Adonai will not be with you."
Thank you, Robin. And Paul, would you like to read beginning at verse 4? And you'll have to unmute, Paul. Thank you.
What was that, 44? Oh,
44.
but they defiantly ascended to the mountaintop, while the ark of Hashem's covenant and Moses did not move from the midst of the camp. The Amalekite and the Canaanite who dwelt on that mountain descended. They struck them and pounded them until Hormah. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you will come to the land of your dwelling places that I will give you, and you perform a fire offering of Hashem, a burnt offering or a feast offering, because of an articulated vow, or as a free will offering, or on your festivals, to produce a satisfying aroma to Hashem, from the cattle or from the flock, the one who brings his offering to Hashem shall bring a meal offering of a 10th ephah, fine flour, mixed with a quarter hin of oil, and a quarter hin of wine for a libation shall you prepare for the burnt offering, or for the feast offering for each sheep, or for a ram you shall prepare a meal offering, 2/10 ephah, fine flour, mixed with a third hin of oil, and a third hin of wine for a libation shall you bring as satisfying aroma to Hashem."
Thank you so much, Paul. Let me invite Steve. Would you like to read beginning at verse 8?
Yes, thank you. And if it is an animal from the herd that you offer to the Eternal as a burnt offering or as a sacrifice, in fulfillment of a vow explicitly or uttered, or as an offering of well-being, there shall be offered a meal offering along with the animal, 3/10 of a measure of choice flour with half a hin of oil mixed in. And as a libation, you shall offer half a hin of wine, these being offerings by fire of pleasing odor to the Eternal. Thus shall be done with each ox and with each ram and with any goat, sheep, or goat, as many as you offer. You shall do this with each one, as many as there are. Every citizen, when presenting an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Eternal, shall do so with them. And when throughout the ages a stranger who has taken up residence with you, or who lives among you, would present an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Eternal, as you do, so shall it be done by the rest of the congregation. There shall be one law for you and for the resident stranger. It shall be a law for all time throughout the ages. You and the stranger shall be alike before the Eternal. The same ritual and the same rule shall apply to you and the stranger who resides among you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Ruth, would you like to read beginning at verse 17?
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land to which I am taking you, and you eat of the bread of the land, you shall set aside as a gift to the Eternal. As the first yield of your baking, you shall set aside a loaf as a gift. You shall set it aside as a gift like the gift from the threshing floor. You shall make a gift to the Eternal from the first yield of your baking throughout the ages. If you unwittingly fail to observe any one of the commandments that the Eternal has declared to Moses, anything that the Eternal has enjoined upon you through Moses, from the day that the Eternal gave the commandment and on through the ages, if this was done unwittingly through the inadvertence of the community leaders shall present one bull of the herd as a burnt offering of pleasing odor to the Eternal, with its proper meal offering and libation, and one he-goat as a purgation offering. The priest shall make expiation for the whole Israelite community, and they shall be forgiven. For it was an error, and for their error they have brought their offering, an offering by fire to the Eternal, and their purgation offering before the Eternal. The whole Israelite community and the stranger residing among them shall be forgiven, for it happened to the entire people through error."
Thank you so much, Ruth. Let me invite Justin. Would you like to read beginning at verse 27?
Yes, I would, and thank you so much, Rabbi. But if an individual sins inadvertently, he shall offer up a she-goat in its first year as a sin offering. And the Cohen shall atone for the erring soul which sinned inadvertently before the Lord, so as to atone on his behalf, and it shall be forgiven him. One law shall apply to anyone who sins inadvertently from the native born of the children of Israel and the proselyte who resides among them. But if a person should act high-handedly, whether he is a native born or a proselyte, he is blaspheming the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from among its people. For he has scorned the word of the Lord and violated his commandment. The soul shall be utterly cut off, for its iniquity is upon it.
Thank you so much, Justin. Mark, would you like to read beginning at verse 32?
Yes, thank you. Once when the Israelites were in the wilderness, they came upon a man gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found him as he was gathering wood brought him before Moses, Aaron, and the whole community. He was placed in custody, for it had not been specified what should be done to him. And the Lord said to Moses, "The man shall be put to death. The whole community shall pelt him with stones outside the camp." So the whole community took him outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The Lord said to Moses as follows, "Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and your eyes in lustful urge. Thus shall you be reminded to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, your God."
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. That was our entire Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of a focus study, then we'll open it up for everyone to share your insights and reflections and responses to this week's Torah portion. And we have several interesting portions in this week's reading. One is this, what we just read, what Mark just shared with us, which is this person who is gathering wood on Shabbat, and then he is apprehended, and Moses has to inquire what should be the penalty for this particular act. And I'd like to focus on this dramatic moment where the Israelites have reached the border to the promised land. After 2 years of traveling, there they are, they're ready to go in. And just prior to going in, they send the 12 scouts, a representative from each one of the tribes, into the land to see, well, who lives there, what does the lay of the land look like, what's the topography, what grows there, what's the food situation like. And they come back and they make this report that, oh yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful land and magnificent food that grows there. Look, the grapes are huge, and they bring back this cluster of fruit to share with everyone. And then they say, oh, but the people that live there are huge, they're giants, and we must have appeared as mere grasshoppers in their eyes, because that's how we appeared in our own eyes compared to them. And the story goes on to say that God becomes very incensed at this kind of response to exploring the land, and consigns the adult population to wandering for another 38 years, and it will be the children who will be able to enter into the promised land. So I'd like to explore different ways of looking at this very dramatic story. And on the study sheet, I have our verse, which is from chapter 13, verse 28. This is part of the report that the scouts make, and they say, "It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and look, this is its fruit." And then they say, in Hebrew, they say, "Ephes." Well, this is the narrative. "Ephes, the people who inhabit the country are very powerful." So Ephes is translated in my edition as the word however. I don't know how it's translated in the one you have before you, but I have here on the study sheet a definition of the Hebrew word ephes. So ephes is a verb meaning to cease, to fail, to come into an end. And as a noun, it means end, non-existence. And in terms of numbers, ephes represents the number 0, nothing. Okay. So we have our first commentary from the great commentator Ramban, Nachmanides, who provides this perspective. He says, their wickedness was in their use of the word ephes, which indicates that the matter is completely impossible. So this is one line of interpretation about what's happening here with these scouts. So this line of interpretation is basically saying, this was a moment of failure of faith, a failure of spirit, a failure of will on behalf of the people. When they hear this report about how huge the people that dwell there are, and the whole community begins to moan and groan and say, oh, we'll never be able to accomplish this. We should have stayed in Egypt. So this line of interpretation is basically, this was a collapse of will and faith in God, a collapse in terms of spirit of their own capacity to be able to fulfill this promise that God had offered to them. There's another line of interpretation which takes a completely different, indeed an opposite point of view about what's happening here. And it's presented by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and he wrote this. He says, the spies were not afraid of failure, they were afraid of success. This is a very intriguing notion here, because what Rabbi Schneerson is now saying is, actually, what they were afraid of is that they would be successful in entering into the land. They would be successful in being able to set up their own country. They would be successful in able to root themselves in the land and to create a whole civil society. That's what they were afraid of. They were afraid of their ability to succeed. This is a very intriguing notion that Rabbi Schneerson is presenting to us, that what these people were really afraid of was not their inability to accomplish the goal, but their capacity to fulfill this goal. Now, what's going on there? So I have a little excerpt of a poem by one of the great Egyptian poets, Constantine Kafeve. He wrote a poem called Ithaca, which is, of course, the story about Odysseus. And this excerpt from the poem, Ithaca, goes like this. Always keep Ithaca in your mind. To arrive there is your ultimate goal, but do not hurry the voyage at all. Ithaca has given you the beautiful voyage. Without her, you would never set out on the road. She has nothing more to give you. What Kafefe and in his poem, and what in a sense Rabbi Schneerson is hinting at, is that there's a certain intoxication that comes along with a dream that is in deep contrast with the sobering encounter of one's port of arrival. That what you've imagined, what you feel you have been promised, is far more glowing than what actually exists. So as the journey lengthens, as the exile extends itself, what happens is there develops an investment in the dream of return rather than in the return itself. We can see how that gets expressed in a lot of Jewish culture, in a lot of Jewish tradition and poetry and readings. And I've got one example of it here in our study sheet, number 4, which is on the back side, and it's from Psalm 137. Psalm 137 is describing that moment when the Israelites have been defeated by the Babylonians, and the elite among them have been taken into exile in Babylon. And from that, we get Psalm 137. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its cunning. Let my tongue cleave to my palate. If I cease to think of you, if I do not keep Jerusalem in memory, even at my happiest hour. We have this played out for thousands of years, where the Jews are living in diaspora. And there develops this enormous body of literature in both song, stories, poems, having to do with the dreaming about being in Jerusalem. And so here we are living in the netherworld of the diaspora. The Jewish people constructed a homeland out of their dreams. And so if they couldn't reside in the heart of Zion, at least Zion could reside in their hearts. If an elder could not take a grandchild up to the top of the mountain in Judea and say something like, let me tell you the story of how we got here. Let me tell you the story about our people who traveled across the wilderness to get here. Let me tell you the story about King David and how he established this wonderful nation here. If you can't be in the land itself, at least you can have a song about it. You can have a poem about it. You can have a story about it. And that indeed is what was built up over generations and hundreds of years and thousands of years. A great body of literature, of song and poetry, dreaming about the day when the Jewish people could return and dwell once again in the land of Israel. This notion about living on the dream rather than living in the reality of what the dream is all about leads to a very interesting bit of both psychology and sociology. So we have here a quote in number 5 from a book called Booking Passage by the scholar Sidra Dekoven Ezrahi, who writes this: the secret of the Jews in the years of their exile was in having and not having, in having the memory and the promise of home and the freedom of the road, in cherishing a home without having to defend it or even keep its roads free of potholes. This notion of living with the dream rather than seeking to make the dream real, of course, comes up with, is challenged deeply by the Zionist movement of the 19th century. And the great leader of that movement, Theodor Herzl, is famous for having said, if you will it, it's not a dream. And so that was a challenge to the Jewish people at that time. Do you want to keep dreaming about it? Having this beautiful, pure dream? Or do you want to take on the task of actually making the dream real, creating a country, having to set up rules about agriculture, labor relations, business relations, taxes, and creating a military, and all the aspects of a real country? Or do you just want to keep dreaming about it? So this notion about that Herzl introduces about you can do it, and once you start doing it, it's not going to be a dream anymore. It's going to be real. So although this wasn't applied, what I want to share with you next, wasn't applied expressly to the Zionist project of creating a sovereign state, the country of Israel, the great 19th century Hasidic rabbi, the Sfat Emet, reads a verse from our Torah portion this week, containing a message, as he sees it, about the primacy of human initiative. So he takes the verse from chapter 14, verse 8, which begins to read, let me turn to it, 14:8. This is the right after the scouts have presented their report, the people are crying and so forth. And then Caleb and Joshua say to the people, the land that we traversed and scattered is exceedingly good land. If God is pleased with us, he will bring us into that land, the land that's flowing with milk and honey. The Sfat Emet reads that and says, this should be read as all depends on Israel's desires. Sfat Emet seems to be saying this moment, this pivotal moment, as you're standing at this liminal space between the wilderness and the promised land, to be able to cross over that liminal space isn't depending upon God, it's depending upon you. It's depending upon whether you are so desirous of making this real that you step forward and begin to manifest into reality what has been an inchoate promise so far. So I want to share with you a painting. So if you turn back, if you have the study sheet, you'll see this painting by the great artist, Mark Rothko. And it is one of 14 paintings that hangs in a chapel, now called the Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas. It's a non-denominational chapel that was founded by the couple John and Dominique de Menil, and they wanted to create a space where anyone could come, meditate, contemplate, enter into a spiritual space that would also bring people back from that bit of contemplation back into the world to be engaged in the social issues of our times. So it's a very precious space, and they chose Mark Rothko as the painter to provide what they felt would be the appropriate visual contemplations for that kind of a spiritual space that they wanted to create. And here is what Mark Rothko says when he's trying to describe his particular artistic orientation. Mark Rothko was one of the great, what we would call abstract expressionist painters of the 20th century. And he bridled a little bit at that kind of designation of himself. And so here's what he said about his works. He said, I do not believe that there was ever a question of being abstract or representational. It is really a matter of ending the silence and solitude, of breathing and stretching one's arms again. Transcendental experiences became possible. For Rothko, what he is painting is an experience, what he would call a sublime experience. He has this encounter with sublimity and then seeks to manifest it on a canvas. And he offers it to all of us in the hopes that we too can use this as a provocation for our having a similar experience. Indeed, he also said, a painting is not about an experience, it is an experience. And there are many reports that when people enter into the Rothko Chapel and they sit there in contemplation, that great waves of emotion wash over people as they allow these series of paintings to affect them, they just open themselves up to the experience of the painting itself, which is a reflection of Rothko's own encounters. Interestingly, Mark Rothko's son, Christopher Rothko, who is a psychologist and a writer, said this about his father's works. He says, his works really were hardly paintings at all. They were suggestions, ideas that come into being at the moment of interpretation by the viewer. The reduction of form and lack of reference to the world of objects shifts focus and attention to the inner world of thought and emotion. This year, as I've been studying Torah more and more, what I've begun to feel is the value of viewing Torah visually as a painting of experiences rather than a reporting of events. Because like any great work of art, Torah is designed to draw us in, to make us realize that we are witnessing something that we ourselves have experienced, and to inspire us to manifest what we've experienced and to make our dreams real. The challenge of making our dreams real, of not being frightened of our power to do so, I think is what's happening in this week's Torah portion. And it is a challenge that we encounter all the time in our lives. Sometimes we're far too afraid of our power, and we shy away from making our dreams real. It's my hope and prayer for all of us that we will embrace our dreams and we will embrace our power to make our dreams real. With that, I'd love to open it up and hear what others encountered in this week's study. Anyone here? Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, regarding number 6, if God desires us, my translation is if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us into the land. And when I read this, but at the time I thought, no, this is wrong. It's if we are pleased with the Lord, that if we are firm in our faith, of course we can do this because God's with us or we have that power or whatever. But the minute we don't know if he's pleased with us, we better not do this. They're very big. And I think that, yes, we should be willing to create our dreams, have them come true, but we need that help. And in order to avail ourselves of that help, that means, as he talks about Caleb, he had a different kind of spirit. So I think that's what I got out of this.
Thank you, Richard. Anna, do you have something you'd like to share?
A different kind of spirit. How does one arrive in one's personal life, from whatever they are, to that different kind of spirit? I'm really pleased and quite impressed that you chose this beautiful piece by Rothko, which of course is terribly interpreted. I mean, you just can't do it on a piece of paper. And I just want to say, I remember when you were on sabbatical studying Pizarro, that great Jewish artist, that we went to nearly every gallery and every museum on the East Coast, minus Washington, D.C. And we were blessed to go to a Mark Rothko exhibit. You ever seen a Rothko? Yes. OMG. They were so beautiful and so subtle that nothing I saw at any of the other museums touched me. Like, that was straight to the soul it's very subtle. What is desire? What is God's desire of us? What is it when we desire God? How, and to have the courage to just step out. Rico and I were both with you, Rabbi, when you had the courage in your life to step out. Remember, did he not? You just stepped out, off to Israel, off to rabbinic school, and off to be such a huge blessing in the world. And I know you don't like to have too much of this said about you, but I just want to say, I personally am very grateful for all that I've learned from you, and thank you for being brave.
Thank
and
you.
You're an inspiration to me too.
Thank you. Very sweet. Thank you. Let me invite Dave. Would you like to share as well?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments on item number 2 of your study sheet. And that is why besides, this was my daughter's Torah study, I think it was 1995. She was bat mitzvah. But anyhow, item number 2, why were the most of the spies are reluctant to go back and conquer the land. And a couple of ideas that I have, these Canaanites, they weren't their enemy. They were just there living in peace, and they had to go in and displace them according to orders. And another idea I thought of too is maybe they were just plain tired of war. They just had a battle with the Amalekites a few verses back, and were just plain tired of it.
Okay,
So those are my thoughts.
thank you, Dave. Thank you. And others? Paul?
Yeah, I'm getting into the spirit of how everybody thinks here. And so I usually go for the easy stuff, the low hanging fruit. But you had all these people that were going out as spies. And the experience that I have in real life, when you send out a bunch of sales guys, and they all come back, and you already know what each one of them, because you know their personalities. Two are going to say it's wonderful, and the other one, we don't have a chance. And so my argument here is, how important is it really to send out, you name all these different people, you kind of know the answers that these individuals are going to come back with. I'm sure, Rabbi, if you had to send out some people from your group, on some sort of charity you're going to build and how successful it's going to be, you already know who's going to come back with what kind of answers. And I think that we're into a situation where the leaders and God even maybe, kind of why send out these spies in the first place?
This is a great point, because this story is going to get retold in the book of Deuteronomy, and it's going to be, Moses is going to tell the story a little bit differently. It's going to be told, Moses is going to say, you, the people, insisted upon sending some scouts out ahead, which is not quite the way it's being presented here in our Torah portion. It says, God spoke to Moses saying, send scouts. So it seems to be God's idea. In Deuteronomy, Moses is saying it was your idea, people. So it's very intriguing. You're asking the question, why did they have to do this? So it depends upon, I guess, which one of these perspectives, which one of these stories you want to follow, and what you draw from each one. Richard, you have something about that?
Yes. That's looking at it as a piece of history, a story about objects that happened. But what you've presented to us with Roscoe, why was this book written? This is a painting. This is a triptych. It's us to bounce off all these different things that are happening, to realize what we're going to do when we're faced with Israel today, and there's no longer Netanyahu and the left and right are together doing something. Wow, who's going to manage that? I'm just saying that, as Dewey points out in his book, Art as Experience, that's exactly, it's not the piece of art is not the object to interpret. It's something to have an experience with and to be stirred by and understand there's all this vagary in our life. And so there it is.
It's very interesting when you talk about the abstract expressionists. The abstract expressionists would say the painting itself is not a representation of, they would say the act of painting was the art. That's what Pollock would say, my movement around the canvas is what the art was, not what ended up on the canvas.
And as I understand, Dewey would say, the art is the transaction between the observer and this thing.
Yes, and that's what Christopher Rothko seems to be saying too. He says something comes into being at the moment of interpretation by the viewer. Okay, and so when we read Torah, when we're looking at this painting called Torah, what's important is what's happening between us and this work of art called Torah. That's what's important. Even more than what's been embedded in static words here.
And what happens to us is beyond all of the words, and it's beyond all of the interpretations. And it's beyond the best scholarship. It is beyond.
It's beyond. All right, let me go ahead, Paul, then I'll come.
Yeah, I just to get my punchline in. What bothered me was the second half, where if you would send out 5 people who are dumb and 5 people who are smart, and then they come back with information, and then you punish the dumb one because he's dumb, and you knew in advance, that was a dumb one, and so you punished the dumb one with death, whatever. So that was the kind of, I kind of started with one thing, asking why they go out in the first place, but then the question comes in, why punish the ones you did?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good question.
All right, and Ruth, go ahead and unmute and share with us.
I have a question about the statement. The question says, it wasn't fear of failure. It was what would happen to them. It was fear of success. And I remember going through this years ago, in a session just like this one. And that quotation always upsets me a lot, because I remember my mother, the analyst, I was like struggling at Cal. I was miserable and struggling. And I'd be on the phone with her and she said, you're afraid of success, because I was doing terribly. You're afraid of success. And that, it would upset me. I was young and I didn't know what to make of it. And it was, awful. Anyway, that's just me. But the bigger picture beyond myself is that when you have the dream and you idealize the dream, it's pure, it's perfect. You could idealize it, and it's never going to be that, because when you enter into the process, it's messy and arduous, and there's going to be difficulties. It takes time, like a long time, and you have to work through all these issues and stumble around and pick yourself up. And it doesn't happen boom. It happens over a long time, and it's a lot more challenging and time consuming than you would imagine. And you have to involve yourself in the process of doing it. You can't just have a pure idealized notion that, like your daydream. So if there's a different reality, to doing it than dreaming, that would scare me, I guess, a lot. Because you have to be exposed to get out there, be exposed. Oh my God.
Thank you, Ruth. Oh, bless you. And let me invite Carol. Go ahead and unmute and share with us.
So yeah, I wanted to keep going with that thought of the fulfilling the dream and then what? Because it reminded me of the quote that is very frequently attributed to Nelson Mandela and various other people, but it's actually Marianne Williamson, who's made the statement of our deepest fear is that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, which kind of brings us to where we are. And I think that fulfilling a dream is frightening to most people, because that dream motivated them to get up every day and to strive for something beyond what they had or who they are. And when it's fulfilled, it's like, oh crap, now what? And finding that next step, whether it is the realization of the dream in its structural matter form, or finding the next dream. It's terrifying to people to wake up and not have that which is ethereal to reach for. So maybe they were scared.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Let me see if thank you, Carol. Thank you for bringing that in. It was from Marianne. What was it?
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne, thank you. Let me see if there's anyone else. Go ahead, Margot.
I have a personal story that fits in perfectly with tonight. Most of you don't know that before we moved here, we lived in the city of Downey. I was very active in the city of Downey, and I accomplished. I was on all sorts of commissions, the school board. But at the very beginning of my striving, when we lived in Downey and I was accomplishing some things, I got terrified. I got terrified. I got terrified of more success and of people finding out that I was a phony, that I really couldn't do these things, even though I was doing them. And it was only after I heard a psychologist say to me, don't you realize everybody feels that way? And it freed me. It freed me. And I was able to go on and do more and more things in the city of Downey. More and more commissions.
Oh, thank you, Margaret, for both sharing that story and for all the wonderful things that you did for the community of Downey. Beautiful. And others, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, once again, but what I want to do is what you do, where you compare one chapter to another. When I asked last time, we were doing the census, okay, that chapter, and I argued the point that it had something to do with the military. It's the low-hanging fruit. But now we look at this chapter, and we have a bunch of spies, and what are they asked to do? They're asked to take a census. You know, what is that? We have to go to war with these people. How many of them are there? And so that same discussion occurred a couple of chapters ago, a couple of Parshas ago, where the Jews were asked, you know, how many guys could carry a spear? So there are, but I enjoy more the discussions that you guys come up with, because the other stuff with the military, it's really dull stuff. That's not why I'm tuning in.
Well, remember too, when we went over that about the census, what the Hebrew says literally is lift the heads up. And so there's something about that moment of counting that has to do with an elevation of the people, and to elevate their spirits and who they are, and bring them into the moment. I want to.
I see. That's why I never saw that. You see, now you got it. Now I only saw that other stuff, and the reason I enjoy tuning in is that this other area gets exposed to me, and I just love it.
Well,
Keep your chin up.
He really counts. Your
Yeah.
thought and your contributions really count in my book. Thank you very much.
We're so glad that you are tuned in, Paul. Thank you so much. I do want to say that this theme about dreams, having dreams, and then realizing your dreams, and how some people just want to hold on to the dream rather than sully it by trying to make it real in this world. We're going to explore that. We are going to be sponsoring an exhibit at the Oregon Jewish Museum later this year of 25 works by Salvador Dali that he created in honor of the 20th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. And so that is going to give us an opportunity to explore this notion about dreamscape and realscape, because Salvador Dali, as a surrealist painter, was primarily interested in the dream dimension of life. And so we're going to use that as an opportunity to have a discussion within the community about the tension between the purity and the beauty of having a dream and the freedom of not having to take on the responsibilities of trying to make that dream real, in this case, the State of Israel. And so I remember, and I'm going to honor my mother, who's going to be viewing this probably tomorrow when she sees the recording. Thank you, Mom. She just told me the story about how when the State of Israel was about to be created, her father, my grandfather, an Orthodox Jew, said, well, I don't know, maybe we should just wait till the Messiah comes around, because rather than go through all the messiness that we know comes from creating a country, and all the conflict and all the arguments, and the fact that some people might be winners and some people might be losers. how much better just to have this dream where every tribe has its own section of a country, and every 7 years debt will be forgiven, and every so many years people will be released from whatever indentured servitude they're in. So instead of having to, how beautiful just to have that vision and this utopian vision, rather than go through all the messiness of actually creating the mechanisms of a state. So it'll be interesting to see how the community responds to this kind of a discussion that we'll have about having a dream and holding on to its purity as opposed to trying to manifest it in all of its messiness.
We have to do it together. It's about doing it together. Why were there so many spices up? Why are there so many people? Because if you take your number 5 statement here about booking passage, and you say in cherishing a home without having to defend it or even keep its road free of potholes, you can't defend your home, one home, without some help from your neighbors. It's not possible. If you have to really defend it, it's not going to happen. And how in the world do you keep the section of the road in front of you free of potholes? It takes everyone working together. Somehow we all have to have a similar dream.
So, and that goes back to Paul's point, I think, about the particular people that went out. So these were, it was intentional that it was the chieftains of each one of the tribes that went out. And the chieftains are supposed to represent some kind of expression of their particular tribe. And so there needs to be a consensus, as Anna is pointing out. There needs to be some degree of collaboration among all these groups in order to make this real. And what happens is the consensus collapses, at least the consensus about making the dream real collapses, as people feel what Rabbi Schneerson is hinting at is they would rather be in the embrace of God in the wilderness than to have the responsibility of doing all this stuff on their own. They'd rather have manna be dropped down from heaven. They'd rather have God help them point out where the water is. They'd rather just be in this environment where God is present with them, is guiding them, because they know that once they get into the promised land, it's going to be up to them. And so what Rabbi Schneerson talks about is what the Israelites were infected with at this moment was what he calls excess spirituality. They didn't realize that, well, some faith traditions, their goal might be to lift people up to heaven. In the Jewish enterprise is the opposite. It's to bring heaven down to earth. And that's our job. So I want to thank everyone for coming together, for helping to every day realize the dream of this beautiful tradition and making our world a better place. Thank you all very much. Look forward to seeing you next week. And those who are in Long Beach would love to gather together on July 1st if you're available. Be well, everyone. God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.